Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Unmasking with Cindy and Sarah. We are so thrilled today to be back on the air after a 2-week hiatus. And also, we have a super special guest today. We have Elise Dean on with us, and this is going to be a 2-part series. And just to give you a little bit of information about Elise's background, she is a therapist by trade and a life coach by choice. She's been a helper by nature, and she has a passion for working with young women, playing a supportive role in this crazy ride that we call life. She describes herself as a lover with the perfect balance of badassery, and I would agree with that. She's been through a lot, you guys: chronic Lyme disease, breast implant illness, infertility, IVF, repeated pregnancy losses, twin pregnancy birth trauma, and a divorce. And so we are going to have her on today to just talk to us about all things unmasking and becoming the best version of yourself. And we're just so thrilled that you agreed to come on here and talk to us and spend some time with us. So thank you, Elise, for being here.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here and see y'all's beautiful faces and chat about life. When you're reading off all the things I've been through, I'm like, oh God, it's a good resume, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. It is a good one. She's a single mom now to twin toddlers as well, River and Bloom, and they are absolutely adorable. And she's just launched her coaching practice called Be Bloomed. And so we're going to link all of that stuff onto this episode so that you guys can go and check her out if you know of anybody that is in need of life coaching, or maybe you yourself are interested in checking her out. So I just consider her a wealth of information, and we're just going to jump right in and get started. So Sarah, take it away.
Start really talking about your background a little bit and your journey to where you are presently. So, if you could just share a little bit about your challenging experiences thus far, like chronic Lyme disease, breast implant illness, infertility, all the things that Cindy mentioned earlier, and share a bit about your journey with all of those.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My life was pretty smooth sailing until it wasn't. And it all started when I was a senior in college and I got breast implants, which was inspired by body image issues. And, I thought that was going to make me happy, and it did for a bit until it didn't. And about 6 months after I got my breast implants, I was just bedridden. All of a sudden, I was working in the corporate space and was so sick, all out of nowhere, and went to a bunch of different doctors, got misdiagnosed with a lot of different things. Finally sought out a naturopathic doctor in Arizona. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona at the time. Her name's Dr. Judy Hinojosa. She is wonderful. I've sent so many of my friends and clients to her who are battling chronic health issues, and she's magic. She really is. And she was the one who basically found out all of the underlying root issues that was causing all of my pain, all of my health issues. And I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And some backstory on that: my parents are both from Delaware, and Lyme disease originated in Lyme, Connecticut. So it's very prevalent up in that area. And we would spend every summer, we would rent a house at the beach up there. So we did a bunch of testing, found out I probably got bit by a tick when I was really little. And my immune system genetically is just like not a super strong functioning immune system. And I have some like genetic mutations, like the MTHFR gene mutation. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And a lot of different other things, just like as a foundation, that weren't strong. And then when I got bit by the tick, it kind of was dormant for my whole life. And then when I got the breast implants, instead of my immune system focusing on keeping the Lyme at bay, it kind of like reoriented and pivoted to fighting the implants as like a foreign invader in my body. And that's when the Lyme kind of like took over and wreaked havoc. So I had about 4 years of being bedridden and going through lots of different treatment modalities. I did like a year of immune boosting, which was like daily 6-hour IVs. We had a joke in my family that I would like jingle when I walked because I took so many supplements. I probably took like 70 to 80 supplements in the morning and at night.
Wow.
I was on antibiotics. I was on injections. I had a very strict diet. I mean, it was pretty horrible. I had to quit my job, move back home, and with my parents. I literally couldn't get out of bed every day for 4 years. And finally treated the Lyme. Dr. Judy Hinojosa got me into remission for Lyme. I did stem cell treatment. I did like a 2-week stay at this clinic in Beverly Hills where we did ozone therapy. And just if there's a treatment out there, I've done it. Finally, I got into remission for Lyme disease in July of 2017. And then I was still symptomatic. I was better, but I was still having days where I would overdo it and need to be in bed for like 4 days afterwards. So, my naturopath was like, yes, you got to get the implants out. So I really fought it because I really was like, this health stuff has taken so much of myself away that I was really hesitant to do that. And thank God I did, because I finally got them out in February of 2019. And I had about 6 months where I was the sickest that I've ever been, just like detoxing all of that. My implants had mold on them. And I had only had them for 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they had mold on them. The casings were flaking off. And it doesn't matter what kind of implant you have. For those of you who have implants, some people have implants and they are totally fine forever. And other people, like everyone's genetics are just so different, and your makeup, your composition is just, everyone's different. Their immune systems are different. So some people might have a really hard time with them and some people might not. My mom actually had implants as well, and she got hers taken out of solidarity for me. But she didn't have any problems with hers ever. And so it's totally individualized, but got them out. And then 6 months later, I literally was fine, and I've been fine ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so like Lyme is good. Everything is now.
Yep. They say so there's acute Lyme disease and then there's chronic Lyme disease, which is basically just how long the infection has been in your body dormant. So mine was chronic. And they say with chronic Lyme, research says if you have been in remission for over 2 years, then you're probably great. And I have been in remission since 2017. So, yeah. And there's so much beauty that came out of that process. I mean, in hindsight, I know so much that I didn't know then, and it was brutal navigating it. I mean, if you're in pain every day, it's impossible to not be depressed. Like you just can't do anything. And, but yeah, I made so many lifestyle changes. I'm like super non-toxic and like quote unquote crunchy, if you will. And
no, I follow your recs. I follow them. I'm like, I do need to change these things.
Well, it's crazy. It's just crazy that things that are not good for us and things that are, we just are expected to assume that everything that we can consume is good for us, and it's just not. Unfortunately, we live in a super toxic world, and you have to be an advocate for yourself and your health, because I mean, everything is health, right? If you have health, if you don't have your health, you have nothing, in my opinion.
Sure.
So yeah, I was better, and miraculously, and then I got married, and we immediately knew that we would have to go through IVF due to some sperm issues. And so we went right into the process. And, you know, my personality I would describe as like, if I want something, I'm going to like get it, and I'm going to
Mhm.
do whatever I need to do to get it. I don't take my time. I'm either an all or nothing type of gal. And so we went full force. And in hindsight, again, if something's not working out for you, like maybe take a second and like take a
Mhm.
step back and reevaluate.
Sure.
But that was not who I was at that season of my life. And we just kept pushing. I went to 4 years of infertility and IVF and all the
Mhm.
things. And I was at 3 different clinics with 4 different doctors. I did 4 rounds of IVF, which is like the hormones, the egg retrieval. And then let's see, my twins were my 6th transfer.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, 6th transfer,
Mhm.
which those of you who are not familiar with the IVF space, a transfer is like a lot. It's like
Yes.
$5,000, hormones, timing. It's a procedure. It's 2 weeks of waiting. It's like, it was a lot.
Cindy,
And
you did that too.
Yeah,
Cindy's
I'm a fellow IVFer as well.
she's also one that goes full in too.
I do.
So y'all
So
are
I
very
very much
similar in
relate
that.
to
Yes.
what you're saying, Elise, about that, where it's like if you want something, you're going to figure out a way to make it happen. And I'm wondering about the mental health perspective because I can only speak for myself that, like, there was a decline there. It kept me in a state of anxiety and then depression and then back anxious again and depressed. And I personally couldn't find a way out of that for a long time. So,
yeah, I am now have been with my therapist for like a little over a year, and I am now realizing for the first time in 10 years, a decade, that like what it feels like to not be in like a constant state of fight or flight.
yep.
And it's really nice to not
You
to
can
not
live.
yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
when that becomes your norm of just like
Mhm.
every day, and it's also super unnatural to as us as humans, if you want to accomplish something,
Mhm.
you usually put in the work and then you reap the benefits, right? Where like having a baby that doesn't apply in that space. Like you can
Yeah.
do every single thing,
Mhm.
dot all your I's, cross all your T's,
Mhm.
and do all the research, do every single thing in your control, and it still might just not work out. And
Yeah.
IVF is not a guarantee. And there's
Mm-mm.
so many misconceptions about the infertility space and IVF, and like no one can guarantee you a baby. And I don't think I really understood that. I was like, oh, you just like IVF like makes it happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, 6 transfers. I had 3 losses, including my 3rd loss was a 2nd trimester loss, which really, I mean, speak to the mental health
Yeah.
aspect of it. I've never experienced depression like I did after we lost our son Wilder. It was
Mhm.
about a year where I just was like in a shell.
Yeah.
And then I got on some anxiety medication and started living my life again, and had 2 failed transfers after that, which
Yeah.
really tough. And I coped a lot by sharing my story,
Mhm.
because I'm a helper by nature. And if I can use my pain for someone else's good, then I
Mhm.
feel like there's purpose. So I shared my journey. I've created a really beautiful community on Instagram that I'm very, very grateful for. Then I got pregnant with the twins and had a great pregnancy, had a really awful birth
Mhm.
and a really awful postpartum experience.
Yeah.
And now I'm going through a divorce. So here we are. But that's a
Yes.
little bit like the last 10 years have been so challenging, but I really am proud of like who I am and what I have learned and who I've grown into and how I'm using my story and my gifts to help other people. So I really do believe that all things happen for good eventually.
Yeah, I so appreciate you sharing that. And I remember stumbling upon your Instagram account. Well, I think it was after you took some family photos for us, and Sarah was like, "Oh yeah, she went to SMU with us." And I think I was a little bit ahead in the program, so I didn't know of you then. But then I started following along, and I was thinking to myself, gosh, if I had had somebody with a similar story at that time in my life when I was going through all of the IVF highs and lows with the anxiety and the depression and then the postpartum, I think I would have felt a little less alone. And so I can speak personally for myself to say that I appreciated you being so open and just watching you. And I remember when you announced the pregnancy and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like, it's just so exciting
Like
to
we were on the journey with,
yeah, it was so exciting to just really witness that because I would see you post and I could really empathize with the lows of getting the call that it was, it didn't take or whatever. And then your body has to come off of all of that. And so I wanted to ask you, because on your website you talk about the fact that you're still standing with a smile on your face, and you are. And so that speaks to your resiliency. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the resiliency mindset and how it has helped you.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring the topic of resiliency up because I just created a post about resiliency this morning on Canva that I'm going to post later this afternoon. But it's interesting because when you don't have a choice but to be strong and be resilient,
Mm-hmm.
and then it, like, what are your options? Keep going or like cry, like, which you can cry and keep going. But it's like when you go through so much hardship and you're so deep in the trenches, you don't really have a choice but to be strong and to keep going. And I think that the idea of resiliency, like, I definitely have had my fair share of days that I couldn't get out of bed, that I was crying my eyes out, that I thought my life was over, that I never felt like I would be happy again. And I think it's really important to give yourself permission to have those days. I think resiliency is part of those days also, letting yourself feel and letting yourself go through the waves of everything that comes with trauma. And then I think just the more shit that you go through, excuse my language,
Nope.
you just are like, now I'm kind of like, I mean, now I'm going through divorce at the moment, and people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, really sweet, really kind. I'm so sorry. And it's like, I've been through so much stuff. Like, this is not going to be the thing that puts the nail in the coffin. Like this, I've been through a lot harder things than what I'm currently facing. And I think that when you go through trauma and you're doubting your ability to make it through to the other side, and then you do, it innately like creates this protective layer or armor and instills this confidence in you that I'm like, I mean, try me. Like I'm here. I'm still standing. I'm still finding joy in my life. Like there's nothing that is going to break me at this point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think too, it's the thing about resiliency is even sometimes, like you were saying, like just laying in bed, you made it through the day. Like that's being resilient. Even if you didn't get out of bed, you're still here. You still made it through the day. And so I think that, we all have that in us. And I also wanted to ask you about what it was like having an invisible illness for so long and how that was for you with like friends and family and things like that, because I just feel like when you have an invisible illness, it really plays like a huge part in your mental health, and people don't believe you. And the reason I say that is because I have a child who struggles. She's a neurodivergent child, but she doesn't look like that. She doesn't act like that. And I have to advocate for her all the time. And I know you were talking about going to see your functional medicine doctor, all of those different things, and really advocating for yourself, which I think a lot of us are trying to do now, is like, we know our bodies better than anyone. Yeah, maybe you have a medical degree, but like my body's different than this person's body. So what was that like for you, like having an invisible illness where you didn't feel good? And finding like the support that you needed with that, and then like how that affected your like relationships and your mental health.
Oh gosh, there were people that I would have like given a kidney to back and before I got sick that I don't even speak to. Like they're not
Yeah.
at all in my life. And I think that navigating any sort of hardship and going through any sort of dark time, your people, like you filter out people very, very quickly. And I am really proud to look at my support system now and be like, God, you guys have really been through it all with me, and like you're my people. But yeah, having an invisible illness, I can remember saying to my mom, like, I almost, and this is, maybe I shouldn't say it, like, I almost wish that I looked sick
Yeah.
so that I would have the validation from people,
Yeah.
because I would go to doctors. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was diagnosed like, oh, this is psychosomatic. Like, you're just imagining this. Like, this is just coming from anxiety or stress. And here I am, like, in my skin feels like it's burning, and my body hurts with every movement. I have a migraine where my vision is gone, like bone aches. Like I just, it wasn't until I found the right doctor who actually sat down with me and spent 3 hours on our initial intake and was like, you're sick. And this is not in your head. And it took a doctor to it took my naturopath to validate that for me, because after a while of someone telling you the same thing, you start to believe it and you start to question yourself and question your own sanity. And you're like, am I making this up? Like, and then you have that self-doubt. And that's where the mental health aspect comes in, because you're isolated, you're depressed because your life is totally different from what you thought it was. I mean, I should have been like at the clubs having a great time at 20 something 4 and dancing on tables and taking tequila shots, you know? Like that's what all my friends were doing. And yet I was laying in a bed alone by myself. And you have the anxiety of not knowing what's going on, the depression of feeling isolated and alone and people doubting you. And so I remember specifically saying, like, I wish that I looked so sick, and people also would be like, oh, I've heard that you're not feeling well, but like, at least you look great. And it's like, okay, I don't give a shit what I look like. I want my health. Like, take all the beauty and the glow and whatever. Like, I don't care about that. I care about how I feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anytime.
You're so gaslit with it, and it's so, and I don't know, it's crazy to me how people just don't believe you. And it makes me also think about how survivors of like domestic violence, it's like it would be so much easier sometimes to just have like the physical abuse of like, I have a black eye, I need to leave, like this is not good. Whereas like the emotional, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't have said this, or maybe like I did this wrong. If I did this better, it plays such a mind game on you. And I feel like those are very connected. So I really understand what you mean, because it's like, if I at least looked this way, people would believe me. Like, what will it take for people to believe me? And I think that's what's so hard about invisible illness. And that's then where your mental health is just so triggered, and you just, it goes all hand in hand in a crazy loop that you just feel like you can't get out of. It's very
Totally.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of make a hard right here, because I want to go back to the early days of motherhood for you. And I can only really speak for myself and my own personal story with IVF, that I wanted something so badly, and I could visualize myself as a mother and being a mother to these babies. But then when it happened, and I too struggled with postpartum, pretty severe postpartum depression with my first IVF baby. I really felt a lot of guilt and shame about feeling the way that I did when he was actually here, because I had wanted him and prayed for him and done all the hormones and all the things, right? And so this reward and this overwhelm exist in tandem, and then you're now a single mom to River and Bloom, and I'm wondering if you could talk about just what are the biggest things that you've learned in those early days of motherhood, about yourself, about expectations, about just all of it, really.
All the things.
All the things.
Yeah, this is now anything that I go through, I'm like, oh, I'm like, this is the population that I just like need to take care of because there's
Yeah.
such a lack of support with
Yes.
postpartum mothers.
1000%.
And so obviously, and especially postpartum mothers who struggled with an infertility journey, I think that they are specifically a very, very, very vulnerable population, and much more likely to have rates of depression and anxiety postpartum. And so my pregnancy, I pretty much was anxious the entire time because I had had 3 losses before. And so every day I just was kind of holding my breath. And then, so I wasn't really preparing for birth because I was just worried about getting to that point. And then my birth was horrible. I basically died and was brought back to life and was unconscious for the next couple days.
Wow.
So I didn't even have that, like, my babies are here and let me have skin to skin. It was basically like, the babies are good, like she's not. So we need to like focus on her. And so that was like, I abruptly entered motherhood in a very dramatic way.
Yeah.
And then, I can't even really articulate what those first couple months were like, other than just a beating. Like it was just, you almost die. You go through the biggest trauma of your entire life, and then you're sent home when you're stable enough, but still obviously not well. You're bleeding, you're trying to figure out breastfeeding, you have 2 screaming babies, you're trying to navigate everything. Your husband has no clue what to do. Everyone doesn't know how to support you. You're anxious about your preterm babies coming in contact with anyone who's going to get them sick potentially. You have to take them to the pediatrician literally the second day. I'm driving in the back of the car with my C-section. Like it just was so much.
So traumatic.
And I remember the first pediatrician appointment that we took them to. My pediatrician was like, the babies look great, but like you look really bad. Like you don't look well, and I'm really worried about you. And I was like, I'm really worried about me too. Like I just physically, mentally, emotionally, it was just such a drastic change, and it's such an adjustment, and like the support was not in place before. I did not prepare for that. And and then like the hormonal shifts and like how much your brain chemistry changes after giving birth, and the intrusive thoughts, and like I have no clue what I'm doing, and like, is this flange the right size? How do you work the brezza? How do you clean the brezza? Like just, it's such a learning curve. And my personality, I like to be prepared, and when I am not prepared, I spiral. And so it was just a lot. And it was really a challenge, and you don't even have the energy to articulate how you're doing. You're just literally surviving. And not a lot of people talk about the struggles.
No.
Or
Absolutely
if you
not.
try to talk to them, I remember like seeing moms and being like, it's so hard. They're not sleep. It's so hard. And they would be like, it's okay. And I would be like, am I the only one like having
So lonely.
these issues? And there's just no space to grieve your life before. It's such a transition to this different, I mean, you go from like doing your own thing, everything, and then you have this child that you love so much. And it's terrifying. It's just completely terrifying. And they send you home with it. And you're like, what? I take this baby home. What do I do? Like they're tiny. I don't know how to bathe them. What if their little belly button thing falls off too early and I'm not, all the different things. I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's a lot of shame with it. They don't think about the mothers as much. Once the baby's here, it's all about the baby. And it's like, well, the mother just went through a huge trauma too. Cause Cindy and I always talk, I don't even care if you had like the calmest birth ever. It's still a trauma on your body. It's still a trauma.
Absolutely.
And, I don't know, Cindy and I always bring that up, but it's just no one talks about all of those hard things. And so you feel so alone and
Mm-hmm.
isolated. And then if you don't have a partner who's supportive and you're kind of doing it all on your own too, that's very scary. I mean, it's just a very, I don't know, like an explosion of all of these different things.
Yeah.
And I also feel like, Cindy, I'm sure you can relate to this, navigating, like, since you went through the IVF process too, but when you are like desperately trying to have a baby, you're not really thinking about like the reality of motherhood. And I'm here to, let me preface by saying, like, being a mom is the best.
Yeah.
I am a wonderful, fantastic mother. My kids are my life. Anyone who knows me can tell you that. I love being a mother more than anything else in the world. But I was not prepared for the hard, like, how I've never worked so hard in my entire life.
Yeah.
It's especially going from 0 to 2. Um, like when you're going through infertility, you just picture like being at the park with your baby and breastfeeding your baby and snuggling your baby and rocking your baby and baby wearing your baby. And then they're here and they're screaming and they're projectile shitting on you and they're throwing up and they have fevers and the dog is barking and you have to figure out what to eat because you're literally going to pass out because you're starving. And it's just like, I didn't think about those things. And I have a tendency to be a little bit of a dreamer. That's like something I'm working through right now. And I think that having a realistic picture of what actually is entailed with being a parent should be like a course that you take through IVF.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please, for all of that. And what you said about needing to understand the step by step and having a good handle on things. I mean, some call it being a control freak. I will own that, and when it doesn't go how you thought, even remotely close to how you thought it was going to go. I don't know about you, Elise, but I had a really hard time accepting support. I remember,
I didn't. I was like, please, everyone come to my house and help me.
Yeah,
I need
great.
all the help.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what is a big lesson that you learned? Because I think I could say for myself, to go back in time, I'm like, I would have gladly had somebody step in and help me, but I was too nervous. And I think I was just hypervigilant. And that was like a postpartum thing for me personally. But for you, accepting the support. I know your parents are super supportive. You had your mom come in and stay. Are there any lessons now that you would connect the dots on for people who are going through this or about to go through this?
There's lots of lessons. But I think that I also am someone who I will accept all the support, but I have a hard time not feeling like a burden about it.
Yeah.
And that's a big learning lesson that I have had through this season of like, it's supposed to take a village to raise a child. And it always has up until this we're so individualized as a society nowadays. And like, there's almost this like glorifying of doing it on your own and doing it to the point of burnout. And, I would ask for all the support, but there was that like layer of shame and like feeling like a burden about it. And so that's something that I've had to let go of because it just takes up space and I just like don't have space to give,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got off social media. Like I was looking at stuff and I was like, I mean, I looked like I was homeless, like the first like 8 months of Olivia's life. And all of the pictures, I haven't washed my hair. I don't have makeup on. I have like pajamas. And I would see these people just put on a nice fresh pair of clothes, take a shower. And I was like, I'm just trying to survive here with my child. And so it was really hard for me also to compare seeing like all of these people and their perfect little lives. So I got off Facebook and I have not gone back.
I'm really happy that you brought that up, Sarah, because we're not supposed to be as connected as like information's not supposed to be as readily available and accessible as it is these days. Like and I also felt so torn between what my motherly instinct was versus what social media is telling me is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like baby led weaning and sleep training and not co-sleeping. And to each their own, everyone is entitled to do what is best and what feels right for them. But I had these motherly instincts and intuitions. And then you go on social media and you're being told that your intuition is wrong and you should be doing this other thing that is going to make someone money. And, you know, it's just everything is a business. And I think a huge lesson that I also learned is to like let go of that and to just trust your intuition, because we all have an intuition, and it's just how much are you tending to that intuition is going to make it stronger and you feel more confident within that.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful to hear. I mean, luckily my boys were 2005 and 2007, so social media was not as influential as it is now.
If y'all see Olivia, I'm sorry.
I think, you know, the boundary setting that you have to do for yourself. So whether that's getting off of it altogether, taking a long break, and I know, Elise, you took some time away, which I'm sure you do not regret that, because you have to heal. You have to heal in some form or fashion. So I love that. Just to get clear, just to get really clear again in your head about what's right for you. Yeah.
And I also think when a lot of people don't speak to this to postpartum, but like you really break into a million pieces and become like a new version of yourself. Like who you used to be is burned to the ashes, and then you are like, you rise from the ashes as a new person, and inevitably like everything changes from that. And so I think that that's also something that I was not expecting, was like my perspective is different after having children. I see people differently. I view the world differently. I have this different lens. I have new standards. I have new expectations. I have new boundaries. Like just everything changes. Like an old version of you dies in birth. And like yeah.
Don't you laugh too at the things before you had kids that you're like, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be like this, and I just think, you know, we're all just trying to do the best. For the most part, we're all trying to do the best we can. But I love when I see people without kids that are like, we're never going to do this, or we're going to do it like, and I'm like, just
wait. Just wait.
When you have your baby, and you'll figure it out. But it's just so funny who you are before children, and how you think you're going to do everything so perfect and great.
Yeah.
And then
I think it's really easy to have an opinion about something that you've never experienced firsthand.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I wonder, I would like to ask you one more question before we end this part one, and we're going to come back, you guys, for part two so that we can hear a little bit more about motherhood and the inspiration for Elise's business. But I wonder, before we wrap this first part, were there any moments in this whole experience, be it IVF, Lyme disease, you know, having your implants out, where you almost gave up, you know, kind of threw in the towel and just said, like, forget it all, like, nothing, I'm not doing this anymore, or, you know, but you found courage to keep going. I wonder if you could share that a little bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely I think it would be weird if you didn't have days where you're like, I can't do this anymore. And I think if you have those days, like, take a break. I took so many breaks in my journey, breaks from grad school, breaks from like, if you need a break, take a break. But I always knew, like, I've always been someone who, like, my sole purpose in life is to be a mother, and I feel like that is my calling on earth. And so throughout my journey, specifically with trying to have a baby, there was nothing that was going to stop me from getting to that point, even if it looked mindset had to get to the point of like, okay, if this doesn't look like how I thought it was going to look, me getting pregnant, me staying pregnant, me giving birth, then like I'll have to figure out something else, whether it's a surrogate or a sperm donor or whatever. But I'm having a baby. And so I think having that like warrior mentality is really important, because if someone tells you no, whether that's a doctor, life, a teacher, a potential employer, if someone tells you no, like, who are you to define my life? Like, if you feel passionate about something, if you feel called to do something, like, you bet your ass that you're going to get there and you're going to do it. And that's what I love to instill into my clients, my coaching clients, because it's like, you can do anything that you want to. It might not be the way you wanted it. It might not be the timeline that you wanted it. It might not be anything like you thought that it was going to be like. But if something is important to you, there is nothing that should stop you from pursuing your dreams.
I love that. I love the idea of taking a break. I think part of the break has to be about tending to the grief as well that comes with all of this, because that's something that we really haven't touched on yet. But there's so much grief in the ups and downs and the getting your hopes up. And then, like, you know, when things don't work out how you envisioned, I mean, and you never really get through the grief. It just gets a little bit better coping wise. But yeah, you have to come up for air.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so hard.
And trust yourself over everyone. I mean, you know yourself best. And I think so many people are like, you know, we were talking earlier, they're so quick to listen to like the first, you know, opinion from a doctor or the first opinion about something. And it's like, no, you can go, there's other people, there's other way, there's other answers. And that, so really, I think as a mother too, once you become a mother, you want your children to do that. You want them to fight for themselves and to do that. So it's almost like very like a primitive kind of thing that happens where you just change.
Yeah.
And you stop caring so much what other people think. And you're just like, I got to do this for my children and I want them to follow suit and I want them to be able to do that. And they see that. And that's, I mean, not everybody does that, but I think your children see that modeled. So I think your kids are seeing you, Elise, like, you never give up. You constantly are like, okay, if something doesn't feel right, we're going to go here and do this. And those are lessons that they will learn and do for themselves and then their children and breaking cycles and all sorts of different things. So I think that that's also what I take from this first episode.
I love that.
Trust yourself.
Trust yourself. I'm so excited to come back for part 2. We're going to learn a little bit more about River and Bloom and how motherhood is going, the inspiration for your coaching business, and we will be back. So please tune in for part 2, you guys.